The Grateful Crane. Once upon a time, in a snowy village, there lived a young man all by himself. The young man was a hard worker, but always remained poor. One day, as the days were becoming colder, the young man entered the hills to gather wood to burn a fire. Dusk arrived, and as the young man walked home with the firewood on his back, he heard a sound from somewhere. The young man thought it strange and went towards the sound and found a beautiful crane in pain. Looking closer, he saw that the bird had been caught in a trap. "You poor thing!" The young man approached the crane slowly so as not to scare it and removed the trap and dressed the wound carefully. "You'll soon be all right. Be careful in the future." The crane, who seemed afraid at first, gradually became quiet. The crane moved her legs and found they were all right, and flew up, flapping its great wings. The crane flew around the young man as if to thank him, and flew off into the distance. The young man was happy to see this and came down from the hills. Several days passed after this. One snowy night, when the young man was warming himself at a fire, there was a knocking on his door. Who could it be on a snowy night like this? The young man opened the door, wondering who it was, and found a beautiful young woman standing there. "I am a traveler and need a place to stay for one night." The young woman was white with snowflakes all over her body. "You must be cold. Come inside and warm yourself." The young man made the young woman warm herself at the fire and gave her food that was certainly not a feast, but warm. The snow and wind became stronger outside. A storm had arrived. The storm continued the next day and the day after that. The young woman could not continue on her travels. The young woman cooked dinner and did the cleaning and needlework to show her gratitude for being allowed to stay. It was as if flowers had bloomed in this house where the lonely young man lived all by himself. The young man began to wish that the young woman would continue to stay in his home. He even hoped that the snow would keep falling so she could not travel. But one day, the snow stopped and a blue sky appeared. The young woman said to the young man, "Let me be your wife." The young man was very happy, but shook his head. "I'm a poor man. I cannot offer you a good life." "That does not matter. I wish to stay close to you." And this was how the two became man and wife. They lived a poor but happy life. One day, as the new year was approaching, the young man said quietly, "I now have a wife. If only I could greet the new year with a little more comfort than last year." The next day, the young woman said to the young man, "I wish to weave cloth. Please make a room to do this." The young man immediately fixed a room at the back of the house into a weaving room. "You must not peek while I am weaving the cloth." So saying, the young woman closed the door. The sound of weaving could be heard from beyond the door. The young woman worked for 3 days and 3 nights, hardly eating at all. As he had promised, the young man did not look into the room. On the morning of the 4th day, the young woman came out of the weaving room and presented the young man with the cloth that she had woven. The cloth was smooth and beautiful. "Please go to town and sell this." Doing as he was asked, the young man went into town to sell the cloth. When he spread the cloth along the road, people gathered and were astounded at the beauty of the cloth. The young man was able to sell the cloth at once. The young man returned home and happily told his wife of what had happened. The young woman listened and smiled. The new year arrived, and with the money from selling the cloth, the two were able to eat better food than before and to welcome in the new year cheerfully. They were able to give presents of rice cakes to villagers who had been kind to them. But after a while, the money was gone, and the young woman went into the weaving room again. "Please, don't look inside. You must promise this." This time it took 4 days and 4 nights. The finished cloth was even more beautiful than the last time, but the young woman looked somewhat thinner than before. When the young man took the cloth into town, a draper who had heard the rumors bought the cloth for a very good price. "We don't have to worry about money for a while. This is wonderful." Not too many days passed after this when the draper came to the young man's house. The young woman was not home when the draper visited. The king at the castle was greatly impressed by that cloth. He says he will pay even more the next time. The draper showed a bag full of gold coins to the young man. The young man's eyes gleamed at the number of coins, more than he had ever seen before. "Tell me, how is the cloth woven? I have never seen cloth so beautiful." The draper asked the young man to show the cloth being woven. The young man did not know what to do. "I myself have never seen the cloth being woven. It's my promise to my wife." "That's very strange that you, the husband, cannot see the cloth being woven." The young man could see the draper's point, but refused to show the draper, since it was his promise to his wife. That night, the young man told the young woman about the draper. The young man thought his wife would be overjoyed, but for some reason she looked sad. "We'll be able to live better than ever." "Yes, but I wanted a rest from weaving the cloth for a while." "All right, just one more time, and then you can rest." "Yes." The young woman entered the weaving room as usual, but this time the sound of the weaving would sometimes stop. The young man remembered that the young woman was looking thinner these days. He suddenly became anxious. Then he remembered the draper's words. That's right. We're man and wife. It'll be all right just to take a peek. The young man opened the door to the weaving room, making sure the young woman would not notice him. What? The young woman was not there. A crane was weaving her own feathers into the cloth. A crane? The crane noticed the young man and stopped weaving. She returned to the shape of the young woman. I am the crane you saved. I came here to repay you for your kindness. I wanted to see you happy, but I cannot stay here any longer, now that you know who I am. Forgive me. You don't have to weave any more cloth. But the young woman just shook her head. Don't go anywhere, please. Goodbye. The young woman left the weaving room. The young man hurried after her, but the young woman was no longer in the house. When the young man rushed outside, he saw a crane flying up into the sky. The crane became smaller and smaller and disappeared. The young man looked up at the sky and just stood there in the snow. The end.